Start us off with a word of prayer, and then we'll jump into our passage today. Will you pray with me? But Father God, we are grateful to be gathered once again before you and with your people. And I pray that as we continue this conversation we've been having this summer, that you would bless our conversation, that you would give us the ability to see your word as it holds promise for us. That we have the ability to see past and hear past the presumptions and assumptions that we bring to the texts, so that as those fade, we can hear your voice for ourselves. It's in Christ's name we pray. I appreciated the musical background.
Not me. Here. Oh, okay.
On the iPad?
That's something at me.
You should leave it. It makes it sound sophisticated.
It's not me.
Listen, I'm not going to touch your phone.
Makes the class sound sophisticated.
That's one of those kind of deals where just dial bobby.
All right.
Well, at least it's not a flush.
That's right. I have dealt with worse. That is true. All right. So here's what I want us to do this morning. I want to read the text today. We've gotten to the point where we're in 1 Corinthians. Is that still playing?
Yes.
That is so weird.
What is it?
And now I hear something else. I feel like we've got to solve this before we jump in. This is going to be very distracting.
Somebody's oh, the machine.
Michael, stop looking back.
I think
I'm sorry, it was me.
It was okay. Hey, we solved it. You're good. See, now you know why we were looking over here.
That's funny.
Okay.
At my phone.
Let me start with reading the text today, because I wanted you to just have it in the back of your mind. But we're not going to jump right into the text before we get into the meat of it, the meat of the conversation. I want to spend some time kind of keying up our conversation by talking about culture, about how we symbolize meaning in our world, because that's a really important part of what's going on in this passage. So, but first, let's read the passage. It says 1 Corinthians 11. Starting verse 2. I praise you for remembering me in everything and for holding to the traditions just as I passed them on to you. But I want you to realize that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head. But every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. It's the same as having her head shaved. For if a woman does not cover her head, she might as well have her hair cut off. But if it is a disgrace for a woman to have her hair cut off or her head shaved, then she should cover her head. A man ought not to cover his head, since he's the image and glory of God. But woman is the glory of man. For man did not come from woman, but woman from man. Neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. It is for this reason that a woman ought to have authority over her own head, because of the angels. Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor is man independent of woman. For as woman came from man, so also man is born of woman, but everything comes from God. Judge for yourselves. Is it proper for a woman to pray to God with her head uncovered? Does not the very nature of things teach you that if a man has long hair, it's a disgrace to him? But that if a woman has long hair, it is her glory? For long hair is given to her as a covering. If anyone wants to be contentious about this, we have no other practice, nor do the churches. Okay. Complicated passage, fun one, which is why I don't want to start there. Let's start somewhere else. I want to start just by thinking about how we represent and communicate things symbolically. And partially just even by how we dress, right? What do you know immediately about what's happening in this woman's life? She's getting married, right? How do you know that?
Wedding dress.
There's a wedding dress, right? It's very clear what is happening because she is dressed symbolically in a way our culture recognizes marriage, right? This is the way we traditionally dress for weddings. What about this? What does this mean?
Priest.
It's a priest. Again, immediately, wearing certain clothes means certain things. Anyone been following the Tour de France? July?
Cycler.
What does this mean?
He won.
He's winning. That's right. The yellow jersey. He's in first place in the race. So some of those things are just outright. It's very obvious what's going on. Other things are more subtle. The way we communicate with what we're wearing. I love this video. Hopefully it plays. I mean, you can do it from over here.
It is pretty interesting.
I don't think we're going to have sound, but you don't really need it.
New Balance.
I love that partly because I resonate with it. I'm trying to avoid this happening to me. But even how we mark how old you are. If you're a dad, right? That's the title of this, is when you have to start dressing like a dad. Or y'all remember the old SNL skit? Mom jeans. Now, the thing is, these are popular now with the teenagers, these styles. But at the time, like if you were a mom, these are the style of jeans you wore. Okay, all of that, there's these subtle ways of communicating things culturally, right? These subtle symbols that show up in the world around us that we probably don't even realize we're paying attention to. We're so accustomed to it. It's just the water we're swimming in. But we're constantly getting all kinds of information around everything around us and the people around us by how they choose to represent themselves in the world, right? And one of the things that's important to recognize is not all cultural symbols are the same, right? What is true here, what something represents and what it means here is different. And we know this geographically, right? And so 24 American customs that are offensive in other countries. If you tip in Japan or South Korea, it's insulting. Like, I'm already getting paid for this. Why would you pay me extra? That's insulting to me. Sitting in the back of the cab, I guess they want you to ride shotgun with them in Australia, New Zealand, and Ireland and Scotland. And then, this is interesting, thumbs up, right? What does that mean for us? Hey, that's great. I gave Eleanor Atwood a thumbs up on the way into church this morning. But if we were living in the Middle East or Latin America, other places, Greece, the thumbs up has the same meaning as a middle finger for us. It's a very offensive gesture. Right? So where you are and the culture you happen to be a part of changes the meaning of things, right? And it's not just true geographically, though. It's also true class-wise. This comes from a book by Ruby Payne called A Framework for Understanding Poverty. Part of what she's trying to name here is there are different cultural expressions and different meanings depending on where you find yourself in terms of wealth. So like she talks about food. The question for those living in poverty is there enough? Is there enough to eat here? For middle class folks, did you like it? Was that a good meal? For wealth, was it presented well? Like, did it come out on fire or something? Clothing, value for individual style and expression. I want to say something about myself. For middle class, value for its quality, we want to last. And acceptance into the norm of middle class, which means the label is important. I want to make sure you see the Nike swoosh or the, whatever, polo. For wealth, value for its artistic sense and expression. Designer, important. How many of you have seen Devil Wears Prada? Right? That's this world, right? The designer is important. Again, cultural differences, not based on geography, but based on social class in the same culture. And all of that's communicating something about their social standing, right? Depending on how you show up in the world. And all of us are taught this from a really young age, right? How to navigate the world in ways that are appropriate for where we are and who we are. Okay, so take you back to what you first learned about how to be a good, upstanding citizen. What rules of etiquette do you remember being taught as a kid?
Open the door for ladies.
Open the door for ladies, yeah. Okay?
Say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am.
Yeah. Say hello. Yeah, you're going to greet people.
Say thank you.
Thank you.
Speak when you're spoken to.
All kinds of eating rules.
Respect
Close your mouth.
Respect elders.
Which one that I was taught as female? Be seen and not heard.
Seen and not heard. We're going to get to that in just a second. Let's put it over here. I heard, Jason, you mentioned eating.
Yeah, all kinds of eating rules.
Yeah, okay. What are some of the eating rules?
Close your mouth when you're chewing.
Okay, yeah, close your mouth when you're chewing.
Say grace.
No elbows on table, which I break that all the time.
Say
Don't
grace.
talk with your
Say
mouth
grace,
full.
saying a prayer before.
Don't talk with your mouth
Don't
full.
talk with your mouth full.
Hats off at the table.
Hats off at the table.
Chew a certain number of times, that's what my mother.
What's that?
You're not chewing, you got to chew X amount of numbers.
Oh, you can choose a certain amount of time. I did chew with your mouth closed. Did anyone go to cotillion?
And don't
I
stop
remember doing
until
that.
everyone's been served.
What's that? Don't, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're going to wait until everyone has been served. Good. All of these rules, right, to help you navigate what's appropriate. And if you break one of these rules, I mean, it depends on how formal the setting is, right? When you're at home, when we were growing up and we're eating in the living room with on the TV tray, watching Wheel of Fortune, that's a different setting than, going to prom for a formal dinner, right? Those are two different social settings. But if you're in a really formal setting, these are the rules you're supposed to follow. And we've been ingrained with this. And different cultures have different ways of showing what's appropriate, right? What's true for us, what we've been taught, may not be necessarily what's true in other countries, right? And this is where, okay, Jen, I want to come back to what you said. How are the rules of etiquette different for men and women? We talked about there's different rules depending on social class, wealth, and poverty, but it's also true for gender, too. That men are expected to have, there's different behaviors that are assigned that are appropriate to men than that are appropriate to women, right? If you want to show up in those ways. Are there behaviors that are expected of men but not women? Are there behaviors expected of women but not men? We've got one. Jen said, be seen and not heard. That's how women are expected to show up. That rule does not apply in this room, by the way. Please let us hear it. What else can you think of? This one too. Open the door for women. That's, I think, is what originally was said. There's a rule for men.
David, I remember my mother used to say, do not jump into adults' conversation.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's not my stuff.
That's right. Yeah. But when adults are talking, you need to not interrupt. Yeah. We have the same conversation often with our children as well. It's not seem to be catching up.
Supposed to tip their hat or take it off?
Okay. Yeah. Tipping hat. take off at. Yeah.
I think the rules of judgment are different for men than they are for women.
Okay, what do you mean?
So a man is judged less harshly than a woman. I mean, the only thing that comes to my mind is an affair. If a man has an affair, a lot of times it's kind of accepted. Well, that's the way.
Boys will be boys.
Yeah, boys will be boys. But if a woman has it, she's damned to hell nation,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So I think there's a difference in the judgment a lot of times between a woman and a man.
What is socially acceptable?
Right,
Yeah.
what is socially acceptable.
Yeah.
Thank you
Well,
for helping me out.
Yeah, anger is another one of those.
Anger, yeah.
Angry men are respected, angry women are, have another
Right,
word.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, or boisterous women are considered, arrogant, whereas a man is considered just a good leader.
Right, that's right. Yeah, leadership gets coded differently for men and women.
Hard, gritty labor, typically associate that with men.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so,
And if a woman's doing anything called tomboy or something, some manly woman or something,
yeah,
That's
there
the
is
inference.
different kind
That's
of
how I-
work that is stereotypically associated with each gender, right?
Well, just tone is interpreted as anger versus not anger.
Right, right. You may be saying it exactly the same way, but if I'm a man saying it, it's, oh yeah, he's being a good leader or something.
Yeah.
Oh, she's come off angry.
Men not supposed to cry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless, there's one caveat to that rule.
Come on, guys.
It's your funeral.
A funeral, I was thinking another
What is it,
sporting
baseball
event.
thing?
A loss. Will you be starting before the Cowboys play, or?
Okay, so I'm thinking probably a little far-fetched, but I'm looking at rules of etiquette, and so I reflect back, and so I'm putting it when I was growing up in the church. And so one of the rules were men had to wear suits and ties.
Yeah.
And then another rule was women could not wear pants.
Yeah.
Dress codes.
That's very true.
No pants. Yeah.
I can remember the day in like middle school when women were allowed to wear pants to school for the first time.
Oh, really?
And that was like in my middle school.
Yeah. I remember, I was trying to find this picture, but I couldn't find it. There's a picture of me when I was little. I don't know, I was probably like 6 years old. It's Easter Sunday, and I am dressed in a suit and tie. And my brother is in like short overalls. Like there's overalls, but they're shorts. And I like looking back on that picture, it's like it was okay for him to dress like it wore shorts to church still, but it wasn't for me, right? There's an age thing even there with like, okay, when do you have to start wearing pants to church as a guy? Which was a weird rule, and like there's no like set defined rule for that, but it's like you just kind of pick up on these things, right? Yeah.
When we were little, my dad's father was visiting us, and my mom put lotion on my brother and I, like, bad talk or whatever. And he goes, "Don't put lotion on those boys, you're gonna turn them to sissies."
No lotion. I hadn't heard that one.
And, but my mom ignored him, and we are sissies.
Don't moisturize.
The funny thing is, there's now a radio commercial that starts with, and I'm like some manly man that don't put lotion on my skin.
Is it really?
Yeah, there's a commercial that
I
says
never
that.
got
I'm like,
that.
Well, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's clearly made by ad. But another thing, sports. I mean, certain softball.
Yeah, different sports are
volleyball,
associated with different genders. Yeah. That's right.
Well,
yeah.
David, there's one part of being a man.
Yeah.
There are certain things that we as men are not supposed to do.
Okay.
Because they're not manly.
Yeah.
Because they start looking like a different kind of man.
Uh-huh.
And then that's, again, those are unwritten rules.
That's right.
But they apply to, they restrict us in a way.
Right. Right. I remember hearing, my brother went to, it was either, I think it was Tanzania. And there, in that culture, friends would always hold hands. Like if you're just walking along the road, you'd see two guys holding hands. That means something very different in that culture than it would here, right? To your point.
They do
It's
that in the
very common
Philippines,
in the
too.
Middle East.
Yeah.
I spent 20 years in the Middle East, and it's very common for men to walk arm in arm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember just being in Dubai and seeing that the women would not be expected to walk in front of the men. So
Yeah.
you would have like a couple that were dating, but she would be walking
Behind you.
behind. Which is just kind of, it was just like, the first time I saw it, it was kind of off-putting to
Yeah.
see it like that. you know.
Like, how are y'all talking?
And then and dressed like totally different, like fully covered, every
Yeah.
woman, and then like the man would be dressed in like t-shirt. and
Sure,
shorts.
like very
Yeah,
casual.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just the culture in the Middle East, if you look at how hot it is, it's 120-something degrees in Dubai with 100% humidity.
Yeah.
And the men all wear white robes,
Yeah.
and the women all wear totally black,
Yeah.
which attracts the heat.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember being offended when Nikita Khrushchev shows how old I am. Nikita Khrushchev greeted Yuri Gagarin, the first astronaut, with that kiss on the mouth, which is very traditional in
Yeah.
Russian culture.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, and all of this stuff that we're naming, if you break one of these rules, there's usually social consequences, right? Maybe not blatant or obvious, but there will be side conversations. Maybe you're like, "Did you see?" I remember the first church I ever worked at. I dressed the way I dress right now, which is shirt untucked. And this was, I know, this was a scandal. And at first I was like, I'm not tucking my shirt, I don't care what they say. And Kristen was like, I like having money, so maybe maybe tuck your shirt in. And now I'm glad to be in a place where I am free. You know? But yeah, like these broaching any of these unwritten rules can cause offense, right? And cause problems, cause conflict. And yet there is still, even from a very young age, we recognize that there is a difference between these kinds of rules and other kinds of rules. So there was a psychologist that studied this, and he interviewed young children, like 5-year-olds. And he asked the question, would it be wrong if at your school everyone's supposed to wear school uniforms, and there was a kid that showed up to school not wearing a uniform, he was wearing just whatever he wanted, would that be wrong? And almost all the children said, yes, that's the rule. If he broke it, that's bad. And then he would ask follow-up questions. Oh, okay, so what if the teacher said it was okay? Oh, well, maybe that might be okay. Or what if he came from a different school and he didn't know the rule, or he hadn't bought the clothes yet, and so he just showed up with what he had? Okay, yeah, no, that would be fine, right? So depending on the situation, it changed their judgment of how appropriate it was to show up in a certain way, culturally, right? And then he followed up with this. He said, okay, another question. Would it be okay if one of your friends came up to you and shoved you off the swing set because they wanted their turn on the swing set? No, that is terrible. No, that's bad. And then he would offer all these other, well, what if he really wanted to swing? What if you'd been on there for a long time? What if, like, just all this endless scenarios of what if? Would it change their perception of being shoved off of a swing set? And that didn't change at all. Like, their perception of, no one should shove someone else off a swing set. And so part of what he talks about here is there is this difference, this kind of very early learned, or even maybe innate, that we're born with, sense of there are rules that are cultural that can be adjusted, right? That it's not the same standing as a moral thing, right? A moral rule you cannot break. It's always bad, and it doesn't really matter the specific situation, right? This is bad behavior. You shouldn't do it. These cultural rules, they're more fluid, right? They're more open to change. However, that doesn't mean they're not important, right? This is an actual thing on the internet. What not to wear to a funeral. There would be real offense and real hurt caused if I showed up to a funeral looking like this, right? Casual, unless they ask for it, right? Like there's been times when someone they're like, hey, we're going casual at my funeral. I want you to show up however. Or my favorite color was this. I want you to wear this. But if that's not there, like it would be hurtful to the family. Like it shows this disrespect, right? That's what you're communicating if you show up a certain way that doesn't match the cultural norms for how we respect those who have passed away, right? So fluid. These things are fluid, they're open to change, and there are subtle differences constantly depending on the social situation that you're in. This setting versus that setting, who you're with, all of that adjusts all of this. But that doesn't mean it's not important, right? That you can actually cause real offense and real social harm by ignoring those things. Okay, so all that to say, a lot of this is what's going on in 1 Corinthians 11. So I want to take a look again at the text itself. We'll kind of work through this because there's some weird stuff here. And by the way, this is one of those passages that, like Pauline scholars, people who study Paul extensively have said this is one of the hardest passages to understand. And even those who study this extensively are like, we're not 100% sure we know what this means or what he's trying to do here. But the overall point, I will say, I think is pretty clear. So we start here. I praise you for remembering me in everything and for holding to the traditions just as I pass them on to you. Which, just pause right there. If you read 1 Corinthians at all, that's sarcastic, right? Like, that you could easily read that as sarcastic. The whole book is like, you have not done anything I've asked you to do. You've not held to any of the traditions. You're doing all kinds of weird stuff. I don't know if he's being sarcastic here, but it's an odd thing for him to say to start off this.
Maybe it wasn't my fault.
Or maybe, well, I'll let you talk about that later. But I want you to realize, okay, you've done well with these other traditions, supposedly. But I want you to realize that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. Okay, we talked a little bit about this, I think, last week. The Greek word here for head is kephala, which can mean literally your head, right? But it can also mean source. And it's not clear which of these Paul is using here. And maybe he's using, kind of switching between these two. And as I've sat with this passage, I think there's something going on here where it doesn't translate perfectly well to English, what he's doing. The closest I think I can try to explain it, the way I've understood it, is you remember when your parents, like you're going out as a teenager, and one of the things they say to you as you're leaving the door is remember who you are and whose you are. Right? Why do they say that to you? Or why do you say that to your kids, maybe?
Representing you.
They are representing you, right? That their behavior reflects on the parent, right? The parent will be judged by this behavior. And I think part of what Paul is acknowledging here or trying to name is this is how this society works, how this culture works. That a man is going to be judged by his wife's behavior. How she chooses to show up in the world is going to reflect either positively or negatively on the man. And for men to know, the way you show up in the world, positively as a Christian, do people know you're a Christian man? You're the head of the household, because that's just how things operated in the first century. Highly patriarchal society. Men have all the resources at their disposal. Everything's kind of funneling through them economically. And so they're the head of the household. That's just how it was. And you've got to know, given your status in the world, your social standing, that the way you show up in the world will reflect either positively or negatively towards Christ. People know you're a Christian. And this is true for Christ too, right? The head of Christ is God. The way Christ shows up in the world tells us something about God, doesn't it? Okay, I think that is what Paul is naming here, or as close as I can get. That how we show up in the world, given the way the world is set up in the first century, this is the reality. Men, the way you show up is going to reflect on the church in Christ. And women, the way you show up is going to reflect on your husband. That's who's going to be judged partially for your behavior. And this is still true, right? Like we talked about teenagers. But if I was going to say, for my own life, I would say Bamel is the head of David. Because the way I show up in the world will reflect either positively or negatively for this church, whether it's fair or not. If people know I'm the minister here, how I behave in the world is going to be like, that's the kind of church that does that or allows that, or vice versa. I think that's what he's naming. Who do you represent? Yeah.
As you were speaking, the thought ran across my mind. You know, when Paul had mentioned holding to the traditions that I passed on to you,
Yeah.
my thought ran back into the Old Testament when God decided to build a tabernacle where the people could come in and worship him, and he would come down over the tent. He told Moses to tell them to clean themselves up and put on their best garments as before they entered into that tabernacle.
Yeah.
So the generation of tradition could have come from that. When we come into the building, we come in our best garments from tradition.
Yep. Yeah, this shows up in all kinds of ways, right? I think another example of this culturally for us. I remember when I first got married and we first started having guests over to the house. People would come over, watch a football game or something. Kristen was very stressed about how the house looked. Was it clean enough? And to me, I'm like, I don't care. Like, these are our friends. Like, whatever. And what she said to me though that changed the way I saw it was, you are not going to be the one judged by how clean the house is. I will be. Which is why it's important to me that this house is clean. So pick up the vacuum. This happens all the time. That someone else, for whatever reason, culturally, your performance reflects on someone else, right? Okay, so keep that in mind as we keep going, because the way some of the women in the Corinthian church is showing up, what Paul sees is this reflects poorly on them, but also potentially their families or even the church. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head. Again, probably what he's naming here is who's the head of a man? Christ. Somehow, he's dishonoring Christ if you choose to cover your head, right? And guys, this is still a thing today, right? When are you asked to remove your hats? Prayer and national anthem, right? Ooh, that's interesting. That's another class for another day. But this is a thing, yeah.
When you talked about the different gender expectations, one that I've had to think about, if any of y'all know my younger son, Everett, when I was growing up in church, men didn't wear hats to church at all. It wasn't just prayer, it was church. I've decided not to fight that battle with him. I've had to think, is it cultural or not? And
well, listen, hey, this is a free church, right?
I mean, that was still a thing in churches for me growing up, was men don't cover their heads with a hat in a church building at all.
I remember going to my grandparents' church, Kaufman Church of Christ. I would go with them whenever we would go visit. And there was a hat rack as you entered the building. Remember this? And my grandpa would always, he'd wear a cowboy hat everywhere. He would always take it off and leave it on the hat rack and then enter the church, right? So this is still a thing. Like that cultural norm still exists to some degree for us.
Used to go to restaurants.
In restaurants, same thing. That's right.
You think of Bum Phillips. Every indoor stadium he played at, he can wear a hat.
I don't know who that is.
Houston Oilers.
That's a great example, though. I don't,
You live in Houston, well.
I know, I'm sorry. He's coached me, he's throwing this, okay. Listen, I grew up with Tom Landry and he wore a hat, okay?
He would have taken it off.
But every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. Again, who are we talking about? Dishonors her husband. It's the same as having her head shaved. Now, this is one of the awkward things about this text and one of the assumptions culturally that's going on here. A woman's hair, especially long hair, was perceived as sexual in that culture, right? It was flaunting her sexuality in a way. And so if she went out in public, women, if they went out in public, they would have their head covered. However, this didn't apply quite as much for the upper echelon, for high-class women. And guess who's probably hosting the church in their homes, right? It's people with money. And so you can imagine a scenario where these wealthy wives are having people into their home and are publicly, first of all, they're in their home. To them, this is a private occasion. But also they're of high status, and so people of my standing do not wear head coverings. But you're having all kinds of people come in, right? We know this is happening in Corinth, that people of different social standing and different slaves are showing up, and really wealthy people. Yeah, Jerry.
Sorry, isn't it also because they have their hair done for hours by other people? They want to show off how wealthy they are?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, this shows up in 1 Timothy too, right? When there's modesty tied to how your hair is done when you arrive at church.
But David, even men to this day in the Middle East are expected to project a manly appearance with a beard.
Yeah, that's right.
And also, in my ESL classes with Harris County, I have to be careful that if there are Muslims present, don't sit like this, because
you're pointing your foot.
Bearing the bottom of your foot to someone is extremely vulgar.
Yeah, that's right.
David, I have a question. I've got a side-by-side NIV and King James, and I realize I'm jumping a little bit here, but verse 2, I praise you for remembering me and everything and for holding to the traditions, NIV. Ordinances in King James.
Yeah.
What is it? There's a difference between an ordinance and a tradition.
That is
what's
very true. Basically, I think Paul is saying, you did what I told you to do. I think is what he's saying.
That's a good preacher answer.
Yeah, I don't know. It's the same as having your head shaved. I think this is part of why this shows up. That prostitutes often would have their head shaved as a symbol of their sexual availability, right? And so he's saying, if you show up to church, or it's not even just showing up to church, leading. That's one of the assumptions that's happening here. Women are leading in worship, prophesying and praying, and probably other ways as well. And when you step into that position and your head is uncovered, it's sexually suggestive in a way that would be the same as showing up with your head shaved. Like, this is jarring and not appropriate for a worship setting. These are the cultural assumptions, I think, that's happening here. He continues, for if a woman does not cover her head, she might as well have her hair cut off. If it is a disgrace for a woman to have her hair cut off and her head shaved, then she should cover her head. Like, as if that's offensive to you, this is the same level as that, is what Paul is saying. Which for everybody in that room, that would have been offensive to see someone like that, to see a woman with her hair that way. A man ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God, but woman is the glory of man. I want you to pay attention to something here. A man ought not to cover his head, since he is what? The image and glory. What is the woman? Woman is the glory. So built into this, I think Paul is saying both men and women are the image of God, right? He doesn't repeat image. This is true for both men and women. He's the image and glory. Woman is the glory of man. Which again, I think goes back to the assumptions that we talked about earlier, that glory is this reflected back to the man, right? To a woman's husband. That how she shows up in the world, whatever glory or disgrace she experiences, it gets reflected. It's like the moon and the sun. The light we get from the moon comes from the sun. The light that a woman reflects, well, it shows back on her husband. For a man did not come from woman, but woman from man, which again makes me think, we're talking about what? this is less about authority than who you owe honor to and how you show up in the world. How is it appropriate culturally based on who's your source? Where's this coming from?
Does Paul not understand how pregnancy works?
We'll get to that. Clearly he does, but he doesn't reveal his cards till later. Yeah, Deb.
David, I have a question. It's been bothering me this whole 4 or 5 weeks. How do people misconstrue the word man is the head of woman versus man has authority over woman?
That's right.
What is the Greek difference in the word head? And I don't understand how people misconstrue head of the house or head of the woman over the word authority.
Yeah.
That's bothered me
That
this entire
is a
class.
fantastic question, Deb. And one that, this is where our assumptions show up, right? That if we want to preserve kind of patriarchy and men having a certain place in the world over women, then all of a sudden the head gets coded as authority. But that's an entirely different Greek word. And the only place, we'll get to this in a second, the only place this word, exousia, shows up in this passage, Paul is saying a woman should have authority over her own head, that she is in charge of herself. Not someone else is in charge of her. It's the only place that word shows up. It's the only authority that is mentioned is a woman's own authority over her own person, which is often gets kind of shoved away to the side, especially if we're dealing with English translations of stuff that, in our minds, head and authority, they're all kind of the same thing, which is not true in Greek, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
David, I'm sorry, but I've got another monkey wrench question for you. Verse 16 says, if anyone wants to be contentious about this, we have no other practice. King James says we have no such practice. What is it?
No, wait, say that again.
Okay. NIV, if anyone wants to be contentious about this, we have no other practice.
Yeah.
King James, but if any man seem to be contentious, we have no such custom.
Yeah, I think Paul is just saying this is the norm, right? This is how we do things. I think it's just different translations saying basically that
It's like
idea.
setting your rules, like each household have their own rules.
That's right. Yeah, this is how, if you're a Christian, this is how you show up, right? Okay, this is the other really weird part of this. Is for this reason that a woman ought to have authority. This is where authority shows up. Have authority over her own head. Grammatically, it has to be that, like, this is not, she should have the covering over her head to represent her husband's authority over her. Grammatically, that cannot be what this means. It has to be authority over her own person. Because of the angels. What? No one knows what that means. No one. You just throws that in there. Because of the angels.
Goes back to Genesis 6.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the theory. Is like maybe this goes back to Genesis 6 when the Nephilim were roaming the earth and they took female. Yeah, they had babies with women, human women, and it's like, again, this is a tinge of the sexual kind of overtones here of showing up without a head covering for a woman. Don't come to church with your hair showing because the angels might lust after you. That's what some people think is going on here. We don't know, though.
The one that I thought was the most interesting is angel literally means messenger. Right?
Oh,
And
true.
So like in
Yeah.
the Old Testament,
It's the same word.
angelic beings are called that because they're the messengers of God. In 1 Corinthians 14, when he's talking about order and worship, he says, if an inquirer comes in and you're being disorderly, they're being moved out of your mind.
Yeah.
Those of you that have been in the Middle East, there are people that monitor women's clothing modesty, right?
Right.
There's some thought that there could have been non-believers in Roman culture that were observing.
Right. And they're
whether
judging,
were doing
they're making
things right or not.
assumptions
They were
about.
the messengers that are going to report back to where
That's
cultural
interesting.
things are being broken.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that before. That's interesting. Another maybe theory on this is like, when we worship together, we are doing it in the presence of heaven, right? And so like, it's not just who's in the room. And so it's really important that you show up in the proper way, right? Like, don't offend heaven with the way, I think he's trying to add more weight to his argument.
David, he's saying that the man still has the last call over the female, regardless of how she dressed, how she looked. You can't go like that. You still have the last call.
I don't know that that's what he said. But culturally, that has how women have been conditioned in our culture, I think, often. And it's true. I mean, that's true. How many times have the women in this room been told they need to dress a certain way because of how men will perceive them, right? Like that, and that's functional in this text, I think, to some degree, and we can't really avoid that. But that's one of the uncomfortable pieces here.
You raised 3 daughters. You go.
Yeah. Well, and this is one of the. Yeah, we probably don't need to get into this, but I've told Kristen, Kristen cares way more about what Ava wears than I do. And I've told her, I'm not going to be the one to say, because I don't want her, she can't have a memory of her dad being the one that tells her this is what's appropriate because of how men will see you. No. Not that conversation doesn't need to happen, because I want her to be able to navigate the world wisely, because there are dangerous men out there. But that's a conversation I want Kristen to have with her. And anyway, that's some parenting advice that was
solicited. So sometimes the big problem we have with the head is that we're not looking at the submission, and because we think the head is supposed to make the person submit. That's the Bible doesn't teach that anywhere.
Yeah,
it's if what's happening is Jesus chose to submit to the Father.
Yeah.
He could have come to the equality, remember?
Yeah.
He chose to submit.
That's right.
Back then, women were submitting to the husband willingly. He wasn't making her submit. That was what women did. And they wasn't even picking their own men back then. These women nowadays pick men that they don't even want to listen to. So that but
I think, and willing may be too strong of a word. I think sometimes willing, but other times I would imagine this is who my parents set me up with, and I don't really have a choice in the matter, right? The only control I have is how I show up in this, right? And Paul's trying to speak into that reality. I mean, often these are older, full-grown men with young girls.
Yeah.
There's a power dynamic there, right? And one that's unquestioned. It's just universally applied in the ancient Near East, right? Which is why all of this is so wrapped up in the culture and how we have to pay attention to that. Okay, because of that, I want to skip forward just a little bit. Jason mentioned this verse last week, and I wanted to mention it because after saying all of this, Paul says this at the end of this. Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor is man independent of woman. For as woman came from man, so also man is born of woman. He does know how pregnancy happens. But everything comes from God. Again, Paul is trying to give you a theological rationale. Here's why you need to behave this way. But don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying men and women are independent of one another or one has more power than the other. Y'all both need each other. And you both need to treat each other with respect. Even if whether it's culturally appropriate or not, one of the questions you have to take with you when you're engaged in relationships is, how do I need to show up as a man? How do I need to show up as a woman? Because we're codependent. He makes this point earlier in 1 Corinthians 2. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but yields it the same way the husband does not have authority over his own body. It's not just the woman who's yielding her body, it's the husband as well. Which, points to what Paul says in Galatians 2, which to me is kind of an anchoring place for our conversation about the role of women. There's neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free. There's no male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. Okay, we'll skip that. David Bentley Hart says this about this passage. There have been many elaborate discussions of these verses, but both the issue and the energy with which Paul addresses it may be easily understood if one recall that he belonged to a culture of extreme modesty, in which a woman's full and lustrous head of hair was regarded as among the chief beauties of her sex. Hence, a woman's uncovered head in public, and especially in places of worship, was seen both as an ostentation and an ill-mannered provocation. I think that's what's going on. However you slice this passage up, and there's a million questions we can ask of it, that, I think, is what's going on here. Okay, we'll skip all this. The message has an interesting take on how to, which is worth reading if you have time. Okay, so first of all this. In no way does this passage limit the authority, leadership, or giftedness of women in the church. Jason's going to be teaching next week on 1 Corinthians 14, which is one of those famous passages where women are told to be silent. This passage in 1 Corinthians 11 is part of what complicates that. Because Paul just said all of this. He assumes women will be prophesying and praying in the public worship.
And they were in Corinth.
And they were in Corinth. Yeah. And so how can it possibly then, 3 chapters later, say, no, women have to be silent, right? We'll get into that more next week. What happens, though, I think, or what's going on here, is it asks men and women both to exercise their gifts and leadership in culturally respectful ways. How you show up as a man or as a woman matters. Okay, I want to give just a brief moment for this, and then I'll close with 3 things I want you to think about. And I actually asked Leanne to come ready to say a little bit about this.
We ran out of time.
No, we did, but we're still going to do it. Cultural norms exist in our culture for how women dress, present themselves in public. We've talked about how there's still expectations for men taking off the hat. But there's things that show up for women too, especially in public worship.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I was thinking about, as David asked me, the amount of thought I have to put into what I'm going to wear if I'm asked to be on stage, or if I'm asked to teach a class. And it's interesting because I think my male coworkers don't have to have that much thought put into it as I do, because I have to weigh, am I dressing in a way that's going to give me credibility in front of people, but also not be too much of anything. I can't wear something. Is this too form-fitting? Is this too casual? Does it show too much? So the shirt that I have on, I'm not in front of the camera on purpose. The shirt that I have on is like a sleeveless shirt, and so I literally this morning had the question: is that okay? Is that not okay? Should I wear a sweater over it? Like, and the hard thing about that is there's no rule. Like, there's not some people would say this is okay, some people would say this is not okay. So trying to err on the side of what's best and try to figure out what that is in this context is really challenging. Typically, I won't wear jeans to teach Sunday classes. Is that wrong? It's not wrong. Does it matter? Sometimes, by these unspoken rules.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Yeah. Any other women in this room identify with that? Does that resonate? Yeah.
But I think we should think about what we wear.
Sure.
There's a reason why you're supposed to think about it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm being old-fashioned, but I think we, as women, we should think about what we wear.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I think everyone should. There's some thought that men do have about what they wear, how they present themselves. Do I wear a sport coat? Do I wear the point I'd like us to hear is that how we show up will be received in different ways, right? Like, that matters, because it could be offensive or it could not be, right? And trying to navigate that actually is pretty tricky. Okay, I know we got a lot of conversation. You have not said anything today, so I'm going to give it to you.
We have to remember that all of this is a result of sin. In the beginning, they were wearing nothing. If we all had our minds right, we wouldn't have to be so considerate of how someone else may perceive, because our minds would be where it needs to be. So we're trying to accommodate for someone else's potential issues.
Yeah.
We should do that, men and women, but it's all a result of sin. And the fact that we're doing it willingly, like you're talking about, is really showing the example of you trying to follow Christ.
So I appreciate that. Okay, and I actually want to come back to that in just a second. One question to give you: what cultural expressions of femininity am I, as a Christian woman, called to resist, and which should I adopt? Right? There are cultural expectations for women, and not all of them need to be resisted. Some of them, like, okay, this is okay for me to show up as a Christian woman. I can express my femininity in this way, and it's appropriate to Christ. Others ought to be resisted. Same for men. What a cultural expression of masculinity am I, as a Christian man, called to resist, and which is it okay for me to adopt? So it's a question I think we have to carry. And then I want to give you 3 guiding principles as we think about those questions. How do we show up culturally appropriate as Christians, depending on our gender? First, this individual freedom gives way to relational responsibility. I'm not just thinking about what I am able to do. Go back to my tucking the shirt in, right? I, as an individual, want to let it fly free. However, I have to think about how that's going to be received in the room, right? And if it's not okay with them, then I need to pay attention to that. Because it's not worth giving up credibility or whatever else, right? Another, personal preference gives way to missional engagement. Thinking about the messengers in the room, people watching. How we show up and how we treat one another reflects on Christ. All of us, not just men and women. People make assumptions about Christians based on how we navigate these cultural norms, right? That doesn't mean we do all of them. Sometimes this needs to be resisted, but we do need to be thinking. One of the things we need to be thinking about is, how will the world see us in this? And then finally, the present age gives way to new creation. Where is this all headed, right? So I love the example of like, okay, back in Genesis, they're not wearing anything. Right, we're not ready for that, right? Because we live in this strange in-between time, right? We are still living in this present dark age, and there's sin everywhere.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting we should do that.
Oh, that's what I know. But I'm just like, the reason I like that example, though, is like, okay, maybe in heaven that's how it's going to be. We're not there yet, right? And so what does it look like for us to navigate this in the present time? Taking sin seriously, but also always making decisions that are directed to how things will be one day when Christ fully comes, right? That's the trajectory we're on. And every small step we take needs to be aimed at that. Okay, so as we navigate all that.
I just had a question.
Okay, last question, then we got to get.
And I've always thought about, so since hair is Lord's glory, and we're supposed to cover our head, are we violating 1 Corinthians? Do we need to cover our heads?
I think if you were living in first century Corinth, you need to cover. But part of what we have to discern now is what's appropriate here in 21st century America, in Houston. Because it's not the same as what it was back then.
Okay, because some still believe in that because they wear their big hats and
Sure.
stuff like that. So they'll never see someone without their hats to keep their head.
Yeah. And I don't want to denigrate that at all. I think for some reason for some people that's a meaningful way to express honor. Like, and I respect that. However, our culture is constantly shifting. And what if like an outsider came in, someone who's like not a Christian comes in and they see that, if they see a woman not wearing a hat, they would not be offended by that, right? That's very different from what the reality was in the first century, where like if an outsider came in, like, oh my gosh, look at these women without their heads covered, like, whoa, close my eyes. So we just live in a different cultural situation, in which I think it takes constant discernment to have these questions always kind of in front of us. Like, how am I called to show up in this moment, at this time, in this culture? And those aren't easy questions. Like, I don't have the answers to that. But. All right, guys, we are way over time, so I appreciate y'all.